Hello, I'm Virgis Valentinavičius, professor at the Institute of Communication here at Mykolas Riomeris University. And we are now about to start our ninth annual public debate, Dr. Lammer's NATO hearings. So it started in 2016 with a little break for pandemic, and now we are here for the ninth time. And well, beginning was very optimistic. At that time, we were discussing how to get Ukraine into NATO quicker. Now things seem to be changing. Last year, about the same time in spring, Western European leaders were still going to Washington to try to talk Mr. Trump into something. Now they stopped visiting Washington. NATO maybe is still a family, but probably quite dysfunctional family. So now we will try to look into how where we are and what is general state of NATO, Northern Atlantic Alliance, just few months before Ankara summit. And Dr. Lammer's NATO hearings naturally are being opened by keynote speech by none other but Dr. Karl Lammers, who is honorary professor and honorary doctor of Mykolas Riomeris University, old friend of our university and Lithuania in general. So, Karl, floor is yours.
Laba diena. Dear representatives of this great university, dear Professor Virgis Valentinavičius, a good friend, and thank you very much for creating this format of discussion here in this university. Excellencies, dear ambassadors, deans, professors, members of the university, students, ladies and gentlemen. When I arrived at Vilnius airport 2 days back and took a drive into the beautiful and blooming city center, I was truly impressed by the city's energy and dynamic growth. Everywhere I met people which had a forward-looking spirit. In Germany, in this time, I am not experiencing this mood. And therefore, I say respect that something special, particular here in the country, close to Russia, where security policy isn't just theory, it is always an honor for me to come here to Mykolas Riomeris University. Especially to speak about the alliance's security policy before a NATO summit. There hasn't been any other region than the Baltic states during my entire political life in 40 years that I have worked for with so much dedication. I've met so many wonderful people, and I have always been just right by your side. While there are tensions within societies all over the globe, I truly admire the Lithuanian people for their resilience, for unity and courage. Respect for this. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is in turmoil. We live in times of extraordinary, rapid political change. If I say that this year began with a political Big Bang, not everybody would immediately remember what happened just 5 months back. Remember the 3rd of January, when President Trump decided to capture President Maduro in Venezuela with a military operation. And a few days later, Denmark and NATO members found themselves in the middle of explicit threats by US President Trump to annex Greenland and ready to take military action. I'm 40 years in policy, and here on the panel are all very experienced people. I couldn't imagine that those things happen. An American president who is making unbelievable steps that crossed lines. And ladies and gentlemen, I think this crisis has nearly torn the alliance apart. Since the beginning of the US-Israel war against Iran and the refusal of European states to join the conflict, Trump very openly threats to withdraw from NATO. He threats to punish NATO members that would have let the US down not supporting the Operation Epic Fury. But you must remember that there were no agreement, there were no consultations before with the European partners and friends, and that we should not forget. Think tanks worldwide are already discussing if NATO can survive the Iran war, and second, if Europe can still count on the United States as an ally in case of an attack. At the same time, the ongoing blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has severe consequences for all economies in Europe and energy markets worldwide. People everywhere can feel the significant surge in price. And the war also has a clear impact on Russia and its illegal war on Ukraine. So let me sum up. The speed and unpredictability of political events and decisions have never been bigger than in these days. After the Greenland conflict and the Iranian war, it is no longer predictable if Trump will decide, maybe, that the US should no longer support NATO and its members in a direct conflict with Russia. European countries need, I think, and that is my position, need to be able to defend themselves in a conventional warfare. They need to be able and ready, as we in Germany say, to fight tonight, even without a protecting US. Please don't misunderstand me. I am convinced we need NATO. We need the United States. We need the partnership and the friendship. But on the other hand, we have to do more to strengthen the European pillar in the bridge of NATO. One side, United States, Canada, and the other side, Europe, to strengthen this European pillar and to remain NATO as, so I think, the most successful alliance in our history. The transatlantic tensions and the unity of NATO will be one of the most burning topics at the summit in Ankara. The next summit will take place 7th to 8th of July in Ankara. The next G7 will be in Evian, 15th to 17th, and nobody knows who of the US government will participate. The president, defense minister, minister of foreign affairs, nobody knows. And I think it is very important, especially in this time, to send clear signals to Moscow that we stand together in our alliances. On the top of the summit agenda in Ankara will be, of course, the transatlantic relations and burden sharing. 5% is a new 2% for defense spending. European and NATO members mainly need to meet their defense capability targets. We need stronger joint procurement and innovation in defense industries. That is a necessity, I think. And, ladies and gentlemen, let me highlight 2 points in 2 announcements of the President of the United States during the last 2 weeks as an answer to that what our Chancellor Friedrich Merz said, that there are problems relating to the Iran war of the United States. He said he will take away and reduce the number of soldiers in Germany with about 5,000. And the second, and that worries me much more, is that he will no longer be ready to send Tomahawks. Let me speak about both questions. I think that it is very important to have a strong presence of troops of the United States in Germany and in Europe as a whole. And this has always been a clear sign of deterrence. Therefore, it is especially important to me to keep American troops in Europe. The good news is that your president, Nausėda, is ready to keep them to Lithuania, and the Polish president is also ready. I think this is an important chance for having these American troops remain in Europe, and that is precisely, for me, the decisive point. European security is indivisible. And the second point is relating to Tomahawk. Putin has stationed Iskander in Kaliningrad. We have been at the border 2 years ago, and as a C8, and this is a real danger for you, for us, for Europe. And I think this plan is obviously dead to do this. Even the German Minister of Foreign Affairs, my friend Joe Wadefuhl, I know him since 20 years, said he is working maybe to reach a change of the position of Trump. I don't think so, that he will be successful. So let us think he will do this. Then we all are left back with a gap in our defenses. And I think now time, we have no chance to fill it, and that's a problem. This is really dangerous, as it creates a gap in our NATO deterrence against Russia. And the right answer to Moscow is stationing its Iskander short-range ballistic missiles in its Baltic exclave Kaliningrad. We must do something against this. But my position is no whining, no lamenting, but acting. Let's think, what can we do and what we should have done? First, we should restart, I say as a German politician, the production of the Taurus Neo. Second, we should think about buying Tomahawks. If he is not ready to station them, we could buy Tomahawks. And the third is, there is a program, ELSA, that means European Long Strike Approach. I think we should consider what we can do to build up own capabilities against the threats of Iskander and SSC here in Kaliningrad. We speak about, I think, in the next summit, long-term security architecture here in Europe. We speak of deterrence at NATO's eastern flank. And let me turn to Ukraine. I think we must support Ukraine whatever it takes. Hopefully with the United States. This remains a core priority for NATO at this year's summit. We cannot lose focus on Ukraine. In the 5th year of war, we all must stay strongly committed to keep up the support and strengthen Ukraine as much as possible. Strong and robust security guarantees by the coalition of the willing are important, I think. Let me turn to another point. The former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen is calling for a new European defense alliance of European nations. He believes that we are currently witnessing the disintegration of NATO. Europe must draw, so he says, conclusion from this. We must stand on our own 2 feet and be able to defend our continent ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe needs, I think, new defense plans and new military capabilities, no doubt. Ukraine should be integrated. And there is a movement in the European Parliament, a so-called cross-party alliance that supports Anders Fogh Rasmussen in this position. What does it mean? Some people speak about a more European NATO. My picture is a little bit different. I think NATO is a bridge. I repeat, 1 pillar in the United States and Canada and 1 in Europe. If you say we need a more European NATO, then my position is we need NATO, we need a strong partnership, but we need, as Europeans, to do more to strengthen our efficiency, to strengthen our capabilities, to build up an own capability to defend ourselves in the case that we are not protected by others. I think that is very, very important, and we need to be prepared for any scenarios. I don't want to repeat me, but if you remember, reducing the number of soldiers in Germany, 5,000, not delivering Tomahawks, that is a probably new situation that will weaken our deterrence regarding against Russia. And I ask me, who will tell the President of the United States that the military environments here in Europe, I tell it Germany, Landstuhl, Rammstein, Grafenwöhr, EUCOM, AFRICOM, this is not only for at the advantage for us, it is also at the advantage for the United States of America. Is there somebody who can tell this, the President, that he will listen to this, that all these things are to the advantage of United States too? They need the regional commands. They need logistical hubs for Europe, but also beyond, for example, in the Middle East. At least finally, all members of the alliance are spending 2% or more, many even approaching the new 3.5 to 5%. I think your country is great. You're the leading with 5.38% of gross domestic product. Respect. And I think we all should do more. Germany has itself the goal to become the strongest conventional army in Europe, but it lasts a little bit, not tomorrow. Germany has published a military strategy for its armed forces on the 22nd of April, a strategy with the responsibility for Europe, as it says. Looking to Ukraine, our defense minister Pistorius, we have a very good defense minister, said that armed forces must constantly adapt even to the challenges that may not yet be foreseeable. In consequence, I think all European countries need to strengthen their operational readiness and defense infrastructure in Europe. Europe needs to be strong and united. Let me speak about deterrence. I think that is very important, and I think it will be a burning point in the NATO summit in Ankara. Deterrence and defense posture on NATO's eastern flank to Russia, especially here in Lithuania, is taking big steps forward. I welcome 2 representatives of our brigade, Mr. Funk and Mr. Seichter. Welcome here. And I think thank you for that, what you are doing. I think that is a clear signal from our country, from Germany, that we stand here for the protection of this country, and for the protection of Europe, as your security, as the Chancellor said last year, is our security. The security of Vilnius is security of Berlin. In February this year, the battle group Lithuania was placed under the command of the Armored Panzer Brigade 45 here in Vilnius, ready to protect Lithuania and the Baltic region. Until the end of June, the exercise Freedom Shield takes place in Lithuania, the first military exercise under the leadership of the Armored Brigade. I am thankful, and we spoke about this, and you agreed, that President Nausėda said that Lithuania will provide the best possible conditions for German soldiers and welcome them with an open heart. Thanks to your commitment here in this country, all for Europe will be safer and stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember a speech of John F. Kennedy, former US president, who has paved my way to politics. He was in Germany 1963, and on 26th of June, he made a great speech in Berlin, and he said, and he elevated the city of Berlin to a global symbol of freedom. Today, nearly 63 years later, I will elevate Vilnius, Tallinn, and Riga as global symbols of freedom of today. And I assure you, we stand at your side and we will fight back with everything we have when you will be attacked. I think this is very important to say, and this comes from my heart and from my mind. Last point, Ukraine. I think we should do everything that Russia will lose its war against this independent state. The terrible war against Ukraine and its people is raging for 5 painful years. Putin continues day by day with these deadly attacks. And if he speaks about ending of the war, he can do it today, in this hour. He is the aggressor. He is the man who started the war and is waging the war. So I asked him to stop the war now and today. When President Trump, you feel I don't like him very much, when President Trump reduced sanctions on Russian oil this March, I say this is a big mistake, as this only helps the Kremlin to prolong its war in Ukraine. Putin does not want to end. He thinks that he has more problems when he stops his war. So let us stand together, side by side, to the Ukrainians. Let us support Ukraine. Let us build up a strategic partnership. This morning, my defense minister, Mr. Pistorius, he was yesterday in Ukraine, said, let's build up a strategic partnership. The Ukrainians, under the threat of the war, are building up an impressive technological, industrial industry. And I think we all can learn from them. And to build up a strategic partnership could be useful for them and for us too. The Ukrainians have changed from petitioners to suppliers. And this, I think, is very impressive. Ladies and gentlemen, especially as countries are running out of missiles and interceptors, it is crucial for the Ukrainian defense industry base to build and produce weapons within the country. And I think it is good for us to produce with more speed here in Europe more weapons we need to defend against aggressors and potential aggressors. Last point is the Strait of Hormuz. NATO states will discuss about the impacts of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran and now by the US. We all are suffering from this. our population, I think the population in all your countries you represent here in this meeting today, we suffer from the consequences for the global economy, for international shipping. Oil and gas prices are enormously. Ladies and gentlemen, what we can do is to, and that is what our Chancellor said, and I think the Defense Minister yesterday, that we could imagine to participate in a peacekeeping mission, maybe with demining, and Germany is ready to send mine sweepers. There are many problems in the world: hybrid warfare, disinformation driven by artificial intelligence, cyber attacks, international terrorism, attacks on critical infrastructure. All these issues will be an issue on the NATO summit. In conclusion, we need NATO. We need a stronger European pillar of NATO. We have to be very cautious looking to Russia. We have to speed up and to make higher our deterrence. And let me close with Jens Stoltenberg, who once said, "In a more dangerous world, standing together is not a choice, it is a necessity." Thank you. Nurje J. Dikoyu Ush Yusu Demesi. Thank you very much.
So, Karl Lammers, former NATO Parliamentary Assembly President and former member of Bundestag Defense Committee for many years. I think his major points stated here were that NATO as a transatlantic bridge still exists. There were some comments on Donald Trump and certain catalog of his latest so-called policy decisions. But I think we witnessed that Karl tried to be as diplomatic as possible. And still, major assumption is bridge still exists on one hand. On another hand, we need to prepare our defenses as if this bridge is gone. Now, before moving to our next speaker, I want to welcome, besides representatives of German Brigade Litauen, we have here in the room ambassadors and representatives of many different embassies here. Welcome. Also, Mykolas Riomeris University faculty, students, and members of university leadership. Now, our next speaker is former Lithuanian Defense Minister Dovilė Šakalienė, now member of Parliament. She was, and she still is involved in many ways in security policies, and she served as a defense minister at a very difficult time. So we are very interested to learn your understanding about this general strategic situation of NATO and Europe, and maybe additional follow-up question, following up what Karl said. Well, Karl was very generous with praise of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia as global symbol of freedom. Is very generous assessment. So my question would be maybe provocative. Do you strongly believe we deserve such a evaluation 100%? Or maybe there are some things which we could be better?
Thank you, dear Virgis, for inviting me here. Dear colleagues, dear Karl, really a pleasure to see you here. I think this is the first time that I'm participating in this format. So maybe I'll share a couple of moments that are also important as a context. So first of all, okay, let's start from the praise. Do we deserve it 100%? I'd say about 80% we do. We managed to have 538. The price was a bit high. You know, that's why I'm sitting here, probably one of the reasons. But also, it is here. I mean, it could have ended quite differently. We could have had 487, and it would have probably ruined us internationally. But we do have 538. At the same time, we do have an incredibly resilient inner structure of bureaucrats, military, patriots. I was actually really proud to have invited into my team Carolus, who is vice minister with another minister. And I think this continuity is also one of the very important things that we managed to save. National politics has become threat not only to national security, regional security, but also to global security. What happens in certain states in Europe really damages unity of NATO European pillar. What happens in the White House shakes the world of every and each of one of us every single morning when we read the news. So therefore, we have learned very hard way that politicians who actually wield power to build motivation, to build trust, also wield power to destroy that trust in seconds. And at the same time, I still am a big fan of Finland's president, Alexander Stubb, who is a fan of less drama, more facts, or sometimes just less drama. Because if you don't have any viable alternative for a dysfunctional family member, you talk and you try to find consensus. If consensus is not possible, then a compromise. We do not really have currently a viable alternative to United States capabilities that we will need in the conflicts to come. What I'm also glad to see is that there is a mutual understanding that United States also need Europe. I mean, certain speeches that have been discussed intensely, and I've heard both of them by J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio in Munich last year and this year, were very different emotionally, but not that different content-wise. It's not about burden sharing, it's about burden shifting. Disproportion between European financial capabilities and European military capabilities is just shameful. And it's really sad that it took American president kicking us in a soft spot for months to arrive at the same conclusion ourselves. But this is just true. Like, you know, talking about truth social, which really stresses us out a lot, there is some truth about what is being said in a very, very implied and unpleasant way to us. So our ability also to connect national threats, regional threats, and global threats has also been evolving. Like when I went last year to Singapore, to Shangri-La, and talked to our Indo-Pacific friends and partners, I think many of my colleagues in Europe were still questioning. I mean, why do we need to be so active in Indo-Pacific? Because our colleagues from Indo-Pacific are openly and very straightforward asking us, where will you be when China is going to, to burn the Taiwan Strait? And our answer is not yet defined as well as it should be, and we should have an answer, because it's going to be very much on the same plate. I've been talking about that unpleasant triangle of Europe, Asia, and America for years, that we are going to continue this bloody decade of wars until the face of this world is going to be reshaped, and I'm not sure we are going to like it. So what is happening now in the Middle East is very unpleasant, but again, let me be the devil's advocate and remind that NATO recognized more than 10 years ago that Iran is a threat to NATO. What have we done about it? Yeah. So again, back to Alexander Stubb. Lack of communication, yes. Damage to trust, yes. Donald Trump didn't talk to Europe before launching certain actions, but do we really think that Iran is our friend? Really? Do we want Iran to have nuclear weapons? Yeah. So we can have different opinions. And as politicians, I think it's good that we have different opinions. I think democracy is still the best thing, even though whatever dysfunctions it has. But we have to agree on one thing: security of our citizens is a priority. This is an ugly world. It's going to get even more ugly. And we will have to make difficult decisions. There won't be ideal decisions. You know, just, I don't know, pink and fluffy. We are going to have filthy and bloody. And in my opinion, we also have to recognize a couple of things. That our inability to admit that supply chains is not the only problem that we have right now. Like, for example, Korea is actually producing now, I think, certain weapon systems that actually are equal or almost equal, or in opinion, some of my Korean colleagues even better than some American systems, and that have been tried in Middle East and that showed a great result, actually. Or at the same time, when we talk about Ukraine, Ukraine presenting its expertise in the Middle East and maybe opening the financial streams from Arab countries is something which may become a significant variable, which is going to define how this bloody decade of wars is going to develop. We may need to hire Ukrainians, hire Ukrainian army directly. If there's going to be a stop at the Ukrainian front line, and when China is going to start the bloody war in Indo-Pacific, and again, in my opinion, it's not going to be only in Taiwan. I'm probably, you know, repeating that like a dozen of times, or probably more, but it's worth repeating. I think that we are going to have many burning points, both in Indo-Pacific and both in Europe. And at the same time, we still have the only European army trained in battle, that's Ukrainian army. And I, as a minister, have been pushing for certain formats that have been difficult politically. And I think that we have to push forward for more of them to actually learn more and in different ways from Ukrainians and employ that expertise better. And one of those that I can speak in an unclassified room about is, again, let's make or buy a hell of a lot of Shaheds replicas and other drone replicas, and finally learn to identify and shoot them down in practice in large numbers. Because I'm sure that military people here who are much better experts than me in that would agree that repetition really does count, and mass exercises are better than a couple of theoretical ones. So we are not yet training to fight the war. Now, another unpleasant probably moment is that when we talk about innovations and our necessity to work with our defense industry, let's not forget the interesting marriage of Gepards and drones, the old and reliable and new and, well, breathtakingly scary. But actually, the very new weapon got a very old defense, which is effective. So therefore, it's not that we have to abandon everything that we have. And I've talked so many times to people in the ministry and people in the system that military planning does not change like this. You know, for a politician, to change our tune is actually very easy. Sometimes I've seen it happen in a matter of hours. But for military planning, it's long years. So if somebody, as a couch expert, would say that no more huge platforms, no more tanks, no more heavy machinery, just drones, I'd like then to put them on the front line, you know, as the first line. But I mean, you know, killing people is not democratic, so probably we won't. So again, trying to keep cold brain and hot heart somehow, and talk to people who have been for decades in the system. Like, for example, again, I'm looking at Karolis. He's been for 3 decades probably in the system. And I'm happy to see people like that to come to political level, also military, who have experience of decades. Let's not just annul it because the battlefield is changing, because the battlefield is changing in a very ambivalent way. We have been resolving an impossible task for Europe so shamefully just 2 years ago that we were not able to produce 1 million artillery rounds per year in Europe. Are these new weapons? No, very, very old ammo. And we weren't able to produce it. So, and a couple of last moments. So, regarding NATO and Europe, I think that what we have to talk is NATO and partners. I actually, again, will remind you of that really cool report by United States Congress of, I think, November 2023, where both Republicans and Democrats, and I knew some of them, and they really didn't like each other, but they were able to agree on one important conclusion, which made me feel better that I'm not the only paranoid one in the room. And they said that in 2027, 2035, United States and allies and partners will have to deter or defeat both Russia and China simultaneously. So I think that we really need to start seeing the full picture, not just the fragments of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dovilė Šakalienė, former defense minister. I think she presented a picture of again, the change in the balance of burden sharing and call for sober approach in building again European defense capabilities. And also, I enjoyed her point that Lithuania, as a country, as a political entity, is still resilient in maintaining this continuing line of consensual security policy and defense building. Because nowadays people could have very different thoughts. There are many divisions inside ruling coalition and some quite extravagant views on defense building. But resilience is here, and I'm really happy to hear that. And now our next speaker is actually a member of this nucleus of Lithuanian security policy continuity. Vice Minister of Defense, Karolis Aleksa, he has a spell as a member of Lithuanian mission at NATO headquarters in Brussels, and also a very successful career inside Defense Ministry in many leading and very important positions. Now he is Vice Minister for Defense Policy and Defense Planning. So my question would be, again, what defense planning looks like in such strategic environment, which is very volatile, mildly speaking. And again, Karl praised Lithuania's spending decisions on defense. But you, as a practitioner, you surely know that to decide spend money is not, it does not end here. So the question is how to spend in the best possible way. So what are your thoughts?
So thank you very much for inviting. I guess that this is not a Chatham House discussion. I believe I see cameras, so of course I would like to speak like academician or maybe very, very freely. but I have, of course, to limit myself. So just, will try my best to say openly as I can. Of course, I would say I would begin on your, let's say, question. This is quagmire, I would say, in principle, because this is on the geopolitical situation and on military transformation. But I will come to this question. But I would like to speak a little bit about transatlantic relationship, because all of us, I think, will speak, and the opinion matters, and what looks from our, so to say, angle. So I would say that United States is indispensable ally. This is fundamental point for us, because realistically looking, if we would not have United States here, it is not a doubt, but it is this foregone conclusion that we would have a defeat here, immediate, if not immediate, so not long-lasting, against, let's say, potential threats. So, or at least this very huge consequences, which would turn into quagmire in principle, because we would lose territories, then it would be really difficult actually to negotiate, because the opponent, like Russian Federation, has nuclear weapons, and then it is, here we go, this is nightmare scenario. So at this point, at this geopolitical juncture of time, I would say, in this 21st century, at this point, it is no other way in order to deal with our security situation. So this is United States here, so it's number one. Second point, which was also touched by Karl Lammers and by Minister Dovilė Šakalienė, so regarding Ukraine, because it would be also disastrous point of view or disastrous consequence for us if Ukraine would fall, and if we would have Russians standing on Moldova borders, on NATO perimeter all around, and of course with boosted confidence, different range of capabilities, and of course with resources, because Ukraine is, we know it's geopolitical heart of the Soviet Empire. It's so strategically important, so it's a must, I think, from Russian strategic point of view to have Ukraine in its empire. So this is one, and this is second, and then of course European situation. So despite whatever we might talk, we need to, a leader who would provide leadership to strong European nations, but who can't at this point to have themselves organized into the separate, whatever we may call. We hear Rasmussen, we hear sometimes European Defense Commissioner talking about different forms, but this is, I think, for a good, because this is for this European pillar. So what we have to do collectively. So at this point, I think that just corners us into deliver very quickly, and it is actually not the first time in history that we are experiencing such case. Maybe in a more dramatic way, I would say, because if we are looking into the last decade of the Cold War, so it was also Soviet transformation, which was frightening United States. That was one of the reasons why United States launched this huge transformation that we actually still enjoying, so to say, this different platforms, those Star Wars. So because we were, so to say, afraid of a huge competition with Soviet Union. And then United States pressed for 3% at that time for NATO alliance to spend in order to repel Soviet transformation and Soviet invasion, coupled with the tactical nuclear weapons. So I think here it's a more dramatic situation, because at this point we are hearing, as all of us mentioned, different rhetorics from United States Trump administration. But my answer would be this, that look, we are talking about deterrence and about few elements, about political will, about capabilities, and about how we are showing those capabilities on the ground. And speaking about political will, so we are having rhetorics, but also we are having signatures or the signs of the let's say of real actions. So look at the real actions, because if we will look at rhetorics, so we might be frightened, and we might go into different scenarios, think about regional groupings, about European defense initiatives, maybe with Africa. I'm joking a little bit, but those panic eyes, I don't believe that shows, real strategic path. So at this point, we have rhetorics, but the decisions of the United States at this point shows no other indications that they are somehow retreating. That's one point. And if they are doing some of the recalibration of their force posture in Europe, so that is exactly what Minister Dovile was speaking about Indo-Pacific theater. And that would be totally silly, to think that Americans don't have to react actually into this, challenge. Actually, they are presenting our allies, United States, actually in the website of, Senate Armed Services Committee, in the House Representatives Armed Services Committee. So what is the Chinese forces in the Indo-Pacific area and what is American forces? And we show the comparison during the time, what was in 1990s and what is it right now. So this is a huge challenge for them. So it would be to speak that they have not to react and not to calibrate. So it would be, I think, not strategic wise, but then it is our job to keep that, so to say, bacon of freedom, this all around a strategic forepost, because that's on the United States and Western alliance that international order rests. So it is our huge interest that we would find different solutions in order to help Americans, Ukrainians, ourselves. Because if United States would be just imagine defeated in China, that would I just continue because this is that's the strategic thought. So then it would really encourage Russians to pursue actions in Europe, and that would also encourage to maybe also some kind of, I would not say that the conclusion would be uniting of Europe. I'm not sure about that because it is not foregone conclusion. I would hope for that, but we really need that leadership at this point. And of course, in the period when we are losing, or if then United States is recalibrating the force posture around the globe, of course we have to take care of those missing gaps. And when the discussion goes about how we are responding to this, with the panic shouts or with the real strategic plan, and I am for the real strategic plan for the calm way of doing the things. And European Union's strategy is exactly approaching to that. We are having different financial instruments. We have to look into those strategic really capabilities that you talked about deep precision strike, and Ukrainians are really good in the long range drones, which is really what we have to pursue, not only us, actually it is Europe, because this is a huge capability. And we see how Russians actually are panicking because of this actual capability. So I think that this is not that bad that it might look, but we should not fall into the self-fulfilling prophecies that United States out, that we encouraging such kind of moves and actions and rhetorics. We have just to do the opposite. We have to talk, and to talk, as it was said, more and more and more, and to show what we are doing, because that is really important. You can just imagine how Americans are really following what we are doing, how we are cherishing our efforts, and our recent announcement regarding the support to the freedom of navigation in the Hormuz Strait. These are important actions. It's really it. So, and we are working every day. And maybe the final thing on the military transformation, because this is also, as I mentioned at the beginning, a part of a strategic conundrum, because we're having this geopolitical fluid situation that we have to be solid on that, and not to lose ourselves, but also on the military transformation and the different routes into having our force composition right to the 2030s, to the 2035. And of course, there are different proposals, as we hear, to go just to drone capability, anti-drone capability, maybe invest 7, 8, 10 billions of euros. But Russians are not doing. They are still developing all domains, all capabilities in the domains. So we have to be smart. Of course, the winner would be that one who, will discover the right doctrinal, tactical composition of innovations. That's the answer. And actually, we are in this road. NATO is like an aircraft carrier, is moving, it's turning, but when it will turn, it will, force the full cycle of innovation. It is doing right now, but we still need those core capabilities, which are combat capabilities, because we will not defend ourselves just with drones. It's the reality. Because still, if we will not have the right amount of of brigades, divisions, reconstitution force, it would be really difficult just, with drones, whatever, composition and types we will have to defend. Yes, we will make a harm, but we will not have other domains, which are really important. So also just not to lose ourselves on that, but I think that we have to kick, of course, ourselves into the good place of ours in order to move faster. I acknowledge that, and also for the NATO. But that's the challenge, as I have mentioned, because we have to really regroup and to get those big forces that Russians have, and now Ukrainians, because it's almost 1 million army. It's a big force. And then to, at the same time, simultaneously, to keep on that composition of those different domains. So that's it for me.
Karolis Aleksa, Lithuanian Defense Vice Minister. Dovilė just called for sober approach, and it was delivered instantly by Karolis. And well, I'm happy to hear that from practitioner's point of view, when you are focused on what you can do in practical terms, it's surprisingly, it looks more optimistic than genuinely political approach. On the other hand, political level exists. We see it in newspapers every day, but here we have very, very simple and efficient offer. Just answer all this with practical deeds, what you can do in reality, not in newspapers. Now, our next speaker is former Lithuanian Prime Minister and former Finance Minister, Ingrida Šimonytė, who served as a prime minister in time when groundwork for German brigade was laid. She, together with basically Foreign Affairs Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis, is if not for them, you won't be here. German, meaning German brigade. And again, at that time, you saw all these transatlantic frictions coming, and at the same time, you managed to have progress on the ground with brigade. Now, how things look for you now to compare with time you were in Prime Minister's office? Are we getting better?
Thank you. So I would say that we need to thank the insightful German politicians for doing something that was never done before and choosing the option of stationing the permanent brigade in Lithuania, of course, after very long and exhaustive debate. But it's not easy to compare to the Biden era United States administration, because you might imagine that was so much different, and the level of debate that we had at those days were a little bit different from what we have now. It's hard to imagine any of current truths, or how would you call those tweets that are not tweets, truths? I don't know what they are named. It's hard to imagine anything like that being heard from the previous administration. I mean, when you wake up in the morning and you open up the internet and think, oh my God, where this is gonna bring us. Of course, this had some good impact on European decision making, because if we had this debate at European level about the need to strengthen EU defense, European defense, significantly faster and more than, you know, this general debate that we had after the full-scale invasion, just after some initial remarks and moves from the current US administration, EU managed to seal the agreement on excess deficit and also on safe instrument, like in a speed of light, if you think about EU decision making, because if not this, I don't know, we most probably would still be debating how we can finance 5% GDP spending, because that was just a very lucky coincidence that the instruments and the prerequisite, the waiver for deficit rules have been established in 2025 after taking into account seriously the fact that US declared that they are not going to support Ukraine in any material way anymore. So that was, I mean, the upside. In every downside you see the upside, and that was a clear upside. That's why we're able to think about, I mean, if you take the whole picture of where the Europe is, I think there are three main things, and then Ukraine. So three main things is, which is also a main thing, but a little bit in a different way. So three main things would be money, then production and real capability, so to say, and then wealth. So if we speak about money, I think this is now the least of the problem, because in the past, during this era of NATO 2.0, when there was this debate that every country should spend those 2% of GDP, quite many countries would say we are not able to do that because we have pensions, we have infrastructure, we have whatnot. Now this is not a part of the debate. So it looks like it's not about money anymore, but then we come back to the issue what we can buy for the money. I mean, how we do not end up in the queue, and quite often queuing for US production, because we cannot meet the demand with European production. And I still think this is a huge problem that we have in Europe, because we're nearly not close to jointly doing what Russia is able to do. And we have all sorts of issues within the industry. In some cases, old good isolationism, or I don't know, industry nationalism, if you can put it one way. Then in other cases, this very classical thinking that, you know, nothing is changing really, and everybody who is speaking about, you remember this Armin Paperger remark about Ukrainian housewives preparing drones in their kitchens. I mean, this sounded like a joke, then it was sort of taken away from the table, but I mean, it tells quite a lot. So I think the industry in Europe is not ready to reflect the money that are on the table, and this is a huge problem. Of course, then we have this architecture issue, so to say. I mean, how we arrange things. Of course, we might presume that it's still within the within the NATO framework, but should that be sort of within that framework we have the stronger NATO, or is it something? I mean, some people are saying you should create something completely different, like Anders Rasmussen. So, but then there is this thing that is called will. And I think this is, for me as a politician, is something that is very much sort of below the radars when we speak about defense and security situation in many cases. But I think that, you know, we have this clause in European treaty that is more or less like Article 5. Nobody knows how to implement that. Everybody knows that we should provide all the help that the country needs. But I mean, how does that work? We don't know. But as in NATO Article 5, same in EU treaty, it's always about the political will. And we see I mean, Putin was going to have a parade in Kiev in 2 weeks because he was not thinking about this sort of war that is continuing now for 5 years, this last full-scale part of it. He will always place the bets on political processes or on hybrid processes rather than on military. I think, and this is rational because the war costs a lot. And when we come to will, then this picture looks a little bit more shaky because we might be very upbeat because Orban finally lost the elections in Hungary, but we see political changes in other eastern flank countries that are in no way reassuring. And I think the bet in Kremlin is that this is a good strategy. I mean, let's go on and look for political outcomes in other countries that actually would lead to the same result without blood shedding, because this is so complicated. Because as Mr. Lammers mentioned, and as we all understand now, the problem is that Putin just does not know how to stop it, because the price of stopping is maybe higher than the price of continuing. And I think in this respect, what is very important for me is this the question how we see Ukraine in all this. Because I think we still, at least part of the commentators, part of the politicians, part of experts, still are stuck in this understanding that Ukraine is a poor guy whom we need to feel sorry for, who we need to support so that it can survive, and sort of that we are in a superior position and Ukraine is somehow in, you know, in this this position where they depend on us. I think this is shifted and maybe 180 degrees, because I would say that this constant inability of EU, of European countries, of United States to provide sufficient support to Ukraine has trained them on the battlefield and also in industry and in other spheres in a way that we should raise the question that, as far as I understand, Kirilo Budanov asked yesterday during one of his debates here in one of the institutions. It's a question who needs whom, actually, more. I would bet that we need each other. But for us, it is important, for us as Europeans, it is very important that we would not sort of slide into this situation where we've let down Ukraine in the past, saying that, you know, you do reforms, we will not promise you any sort of membership. You do reforms, you know, reforms are good for you, so why don't you do reforms, and this sort of stuff. Now we are in a different phase, because there is a formal invitation to debate the membership in the EU, but we see what's going along the way. I mean, it's a little bit like that in the past, maybe somewhat mild, but I think we should not sort of miss the point where we offer Ukraine a decent partnership in a alliance of European countries that would help us and Ukraine to build a strong front against Russia. Because if we miss this for all sorts of, meritocracy, appraisal of EU membership and stuff, at some point we might feel very sorry for not doing the right thing at the right time. But otherwise, I think the general idea is that, it's right to say that we should not panic and let's sort of freeze and stand if we cannot move because Trump said something. But on the other hand, it's not wise to think that this is just rhetoric. Things are like they were always. If something happens, there will be like, all the solutions will be like we know in our plan A. I can imagine how Danish people felt when they had to think through what if, but they still did that. So however unpleasant it might seem, you still need to think about also unpleasant outcomes, because only then you are really prepared. You at least have thought through this. And if you do not do that on a on a premise that, I mean, it's just words, everything is fine, and just let's go back to work. So let's get back to work, but when you work, I think it's smart to sort of not to stay stuck in the conditions that are nice to think about. That would be my point. Thanks.
Ingrida Šimonytė, former Prime Minister, member of Parliament. So rhetorics do matter. Rhetorics matter, not less than deeds. And I think we had a very good insight into European Union's mechanics of dealing with a problem, rather Byzantine structures which are slowing down political will on every step. And I think a very important point Ingrida made was that every time when Europe is irresolute, when Europe is up to its capabilities, every time Europe is denied the right to take high ground, moral high ground against Ukraine. And so you need to do more to earn the right for high ground towards Ukraine, and room for improvement is rather big, probably too big. So thank you. Now, our next speaker is Vytautas Bruveris, journalist and political commentator. In America, they call people like him columnists. And he has a distinction lately to have a regular podcast with former Foreign Affairs Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis. They are discussing usually same range of issues as we here today. But another important point about Vytautas is he is regularly visiting Ukraine, and basically soldiers at the front line. So he knows firsthand how people, how soldiers in Ukraine see matters in the rest of the world, how they perceive what Europe is doing, how they, what they think about Americans and so on. So Vytautas, what they are thinking about this American-European turmoil inside NATO.
Well, most usual answer when I meet combat troops and first ask how's the situation, how the things are, what's up. They have the counter question. They're saying, what answer do you want? Official one on the record or real one? I'm saying, of course, real one. And they are using obscene Russian Ukrainian rhetoric. The most universal answer is constantly bad, constantly F word up. So that's like the general accession. And usually when I want some insights, forecasts, so to say, assessment on the situation on the ground, at least for foreseeable future, of course I go there. And of course I understand, and they themselves, people are saying that we are limited. Of course, we have our own subjectivities, our own distorted optics. We only see, first of all, physically, we see only our like front line. Everything is, our limitations are in there like that. But usually, from my experience, all the things you're hearing here, after that, after the 3 or 4 months returning back here, you start hearing this on the like formats like this. So the mood, the mood is always also like the same. It isn't changing over the years, despite everything, despite all the things which are constantly worsening. I hope we are not buying into rather successful Ukrainian strategic communications or more primitively said state propaganda. Or other things, trumpeting that all is finished, Russia is finished, Ukraine has regained the upper hand, initiative, and the tide is turning, and the war is moving now towards ruination and collapse of Russian regime and victory. Of course, no, and nobody on the front line won't say you this. But what is saving people there is that they do not have very much time for big speculations and contemplations. There is this constant, as I call it, working mood, like of work, constant work environment, and constant understanding, existential posture of people that they just have no other option. There is no other way. All the constructions, all the theories, all our speculations are seen as very fragile and very kind of sometimes irrelevant there, because they understand and see that reality at the end of the day is, despite everything in this war, is existential towards both sides. Russian regime, you can say even Russian state, as we know it in its current form, and Ukraine as a state. Either, as Ukrainian soldiers are saying, either they, us, either we, them, period. That's it. That's the end of any kind of big global geopolitical discussion out there in those places. Of course, there are a lot of smart, intelligent people who can say and have to say a lot about big and interesting and philosophical things, but at the end of the day, they have to have, okay, I'll say it, the shit done. So that's the main point I want to fix and to assume the things up like it's now. I'm kind of in that position because we are running out of time. So, okay, I will say a little bit maybe on NATO and this transatlantic thing. Of course, words matter and the rhetorics matter, but this is not about rhetorics. Trump is a man with a plan. And MAGA team and MAGA America is a country with the plan. They're very consistent. They always were. Since the first term, Trump and his team wants to pull out America from NATO. And they are moving towards that direction, pushing the things towards that. The only thing they can't do this at the speed they want and at the limit they want, because it depends on their grip on power inside their own country. We are hostages, NATO alliance, and we Europeans, we are hostages of internal US political dynamics. It depends on the grip on the power of Trump administration. If they are losing this grip, NATO as a transatlantic alliance will have more chances like to, I don't know, survive or something. If not, if it is opposite direction, they will pull out and dismantle NATO or make sure that the NATO, American presence in NATO will be totally virtual, like on Zoom. That's or inaccessible Zoom. And that's it. I simply, so we are hostages of that situation. Seeing this reality, I see kind of also symptomatic in bad thing, our internal European conceptual confusion, which was present here in this room, at least for me very vividly. We are still stuck in this conceptual gap, having no conception, no consensus, and even not real discussion about, so what point, what strategic point and what optics is most needed and most relevant. Do we must behave very cautiously and very, so to say, polite and diplomatic and to, who said, unreliable family member? Yeah, dysfunctional, okay. And we should first of all, and no matter what, talk back dysfunctional family member into family? Or we should say for dysfunctional family member, okay, we love you, but please pull your things together, and we are kind of doing, we are trying, well, to fill in the gap by ourselves. You left already, you already left. Or the main damage is already done. Trust is, if not gone, it's fundamentally shattered. All the main damage is already done by rhetorics. And not only by rhetorics, by concrete deeds. So that's, and I see this direct connection to this matter of political will. All the people and all the politicians who want somehow to abandon the real urgency and the real need to build European geopolitical, military and political subjectivity, they always like defend this by, but if we will be doing this in real urgency and in real political consistency, we will like insult Americans and we will somehow scare Americans and give well, we will insult Trump. So let's do it very cautiously and somehow in very limited way. Not maybe with all the respect on that position that the urgency is such and the unreliability of the family member is of such scale that we should think about some real alternatives, like real substitute, some substitute for NATO. I don't know, substitute for NATO or some totally parallel structures or something like that. But I think the very life will push us towards that. Because real life and things on the ground are moving so much faster than our, with all the due respect to us and our discussions. And yes, the very dynamics of the war on the ground in Ukraine, all the implications which are already there, will dictate the reality that real NATO in the X day, in the day of doom, will be the actually geographical one, maybe regional one, with I hope Poland in the center. Very much hope for Germany, of course, but it will be those countries, those real coalition of the willing, so to say. And if we are summing it all up and finalizing, the thing we are talking about, it's not only like strictly formally NATO. We are talking about a European geopolitical subjectivity, yes, about Europe regaining and the real geopolitical posture and real geopolitical and military subjectivity. The only real way and the first way and the very like urgent way in terms that it demands the answers right now lies, yes, it was said here multiple times, but I want just to stress it very much because I regard it as a core like axis of the strategical optics and thinking is of course Ukrainian front line. I mean front line. If you look at the Ukrainian, you can imagine that this is the way for Europe towards real objectivity, 1,000 kilometers long, like this, and look at the map and imagine, because it's really like that. What do I mean? The only one and first and urgent thing to do for any coalition of the European willing and gaining real subjectivity in civilization and geopolitical and European terms, not only in NATO framework, is putting all the effort as soon as possible, just throwing everything in order to make sure that Ukrainian forces of Ukrainian defense is able at last to stop and stabilize front line. It sounds like kind of very simple, but also it's I somehow I see it's of crucial importance, because if the front line is stopped, if Russian forces are just physically stopped by sheer power, by sheer military power, and unable to move forward even an inch, that's the first step to real military and strategic defeat of Russian Federation. That's the first definition of the Ukrainian victory. We forgot our discussions, by the way. What is the Ukrainian victory? How can we achieve it? Nobody is no longer talking about this, because you know every who starts to talk about Ukrainian victory is already seen as, oh, what's this person mean? He talks about, or she, about not real, not relevant things. If the Russian forces are denied of advance by, I repeat, by sheer military power, denied of advance, that's the start, very, very possible and very real start of defeat of Russian army in Ukraine. The internal erosion and demoralization, with potentially, really in this time, in this case, very destructive consequences for the regime as a whole. Until Russians are able to move at least 1 kilometer a month, putting in there like several thousands dead soldiers, nothing will change. All the things we are talking here about will be just pure speculations. So that's the real and first and foremost urgency to put in the core and in the axis of any European strategical thinking. Military people, I hope and I think, totally understand that and see that. Ukrainian military people, Ukrainian military leadership are talking about this openly, planning and everything, but it must be put in any center of any level, political, geopolitical, military, economical, etc. That's the first and foremost thing. If front line in Ukraine is stopped, that's the first step. The next step, of course, then Russian dictatorship will try to escalate things. because they are always doing this. They won't de-escalate or stop then, or then start political conversations. Then we should be preparing and be prepared for the next phase of escalation. But I'm returning to the start of my speech. Like, we are in the same historical boat with Ukrainian soldiers. There is like no other option than to pick up the fight. That's it.
Vytautas Bruveris, journalist and commentator. I think it is a very good point to sum up entire discussion, that it is existential. It's like for soldiers on Ukrainian front line, either they defeat us or we defeat them. And also Karolis was talking about if United States are defeated by China, for example, it's existential. So in the end, it is a discussion not about NATO survival, but about survival of the free world. And I think every time I promise to give questions to the audience, but we are running out of time. So hope to see you all next spring, about same time, first half of May, maybe with possibility to get to ask questions for the public. Thank you very much.
Don't invite politicians.